All right. Hello, everyone. We're happy so many of you showed up to our talk tonight. This is the first speaker event we are organizing here at Clarion, so we're really excited to see how everyone here is going to enjoy the event tonight. For those of you who are not familiar with us, our goal at Clarion is to create spaces for high-quality intellectual discussions. We try to create a space where ambitious people meet to challenge their beliefs, find the best new ideas, and act on them. Besides large events like this, we regularly organize discussion groups, small discussion groups, public and private, where we have the chance to dive deep into topics and focus more directly on each other's intellectual development. So if you're interested in any of that, make sure to follow us on X. Our account is @ClarionSF, or scan any of the QR codes, or come up to me or anyone in the first row here to talk about what we're doing. A big part of Clarion is talking about ideas that we think are really important and valuable, and that are unknown, or at least we think under-discussed in our culture. And today we'll talk about some of those unknown ideas that we think are really important for you as individuals, but also for us as a culture and as a country. I can't think of anyone better to talk about those ideas than our speaker tonight, Yaron Brook. Yaron Brook is the chairman of the board of the Ayn Rand Institute. He's the most successful communicator of Ayn Rand's ideas. He hosts the Yaron Brook Show on YouTube, and he's written numerous books on the virtues of capitalism and individualism. So please welcome to the stage, Yaron Brook.
Thank you. Thank you guys for organizing this. I know this was, to a large extent, a last-minute thing, and this is an amazing audience. Given how few days you had to organize it, I'm going to have to come to San Francisco more often now that I see these tools being used so effectively. So I love this area. I lived in the Bay Area a long time ago. I was saying I think I'm the oldest guy in the room. So before you were born, I lived in the Bay Area during the first dot-com bubble, and I love this area. I mean, you guys represent. I don't know particulars, but you guys represent, I think, the most exciting group of people on the planet. You guys are builders. You're makers. You're the people who are going to change the world. You are changing the world. And people like you have already changed the world. I came here on a Waymo. And, you know, I don't come to San Francisco often. You can ask me afterwards where I live. And it was unbelievable. It was so cool. It's the future, right? It's literally the future. We're not going to be driving cars. So, and you guys are what are creating that future. And this is the great mystery. This is the great mystery in the world, I think, out there. Is in spite of the fact that you're incredibly productive and you're changing the world and you're creating these technologies that people will benefit from for decades to come, nobody really likes you. And in particular, nobody really likes you if you are successful. And the more successful you're going to be, the less they're going to like you. I was just watching this TV show. I think it's on Max. It's a comedy called Hacks. I don't know if you've watched it, about stand-up comedians. It's quite funny, I think. But one of the running jokes in the show is the extent to which we should all hate billionaires. And there's no question mark about it. It's just, yeah, we should all hate billionaires. And of course, who are the billionaires? The billionaires are not the oligarchs of Russia who stole their wealth. The billionaires are not some class of mafiosos. The billionaires are some of the people in this room, maybe one day. But the billionaires are people who, in America at least, have produced their wealth, have created it, have changed the world in the process. And you could say, made the world a better place in the process. And yet, they're hated. You could see a little bit of this in the latest MAGA versus tech bro squabble over immigration, right? I mean, you could see kind of a little bit of this. We despise you guys. And that came from the right when it's typically from the left, right? But it doesn't really matter, politics. Billionaires are just not liked. Successful people who make a lot of money are just not liked in our culture. And I think it's really an important question to ask why that is. And why it is that so many successful people, so many of the billionaires, if you will, don't have the tools, the vocabulary, a way to express themselves in a way that suggests, wait a minute, we deserve your love. We changed your life. We made the world a better place. And yeah, we're having fun. They can't do it. I don't see anybody out there on the horizon actually articulating that argument and making the case in a convincing way. If anything, they spend most of their time apologizing for their wealth, apologizing for their success, apologizing for making as much money as they did. And a lot of the philanthropy that a lot of wealthy individuals commit is a philanthropy that is not motivated by love. We really want to help these causes. We really believe in these causes. We really think these causes are amazing, so we'll give them gazillions of dollars. But they're motivated by a sense of guilt. Motivated by a sense of, well, maybe they have a point. Maybe I'm not such a good guy. And maybe this is the way I'll buy myself into heaven. And this is not new. This is not about this particular breed of tech billionaires. This is true in the entire American history. What do we call the 19th century billionaires, or the equivalent of? What is the name we give them, the way they're described in our textbooks in our schools? They're called what? Robber barons. Robber barons. These are guys who built this country. Is there San Francisco without the businessmen who created the tools that made it possible for the gold mines to run, including those jeans, right? Levi's. Now he's, I guess, one of the heirs is your mayor. I mean, is there any place in the United States without the industrialists who built steel mills, without the bankers who funded all that, the equivalent of the venture capitalists of today? And yet, we don't consider the fact that they built something, they created the modern world, they created the world in which we live. No. They are robber. And why barons? What's associated with barons? Why is that good? That has an emotional impact. Because a baron is an aristocrat. It's nobility. And aristocrats, what made an aristocrat an aristocrat? What's the difference between an aristocrat and a businessman? Businessmen create their wealth. Aristocrats inherit it. But where did the original wealth come from if they inherited it? What's that? They stole it. They stole it. The only way in the old times to become an aristocrat was to steal the wealth, because it was indeed a zero-sum game. But we don't live in a zero-sum world. We don't live in a zero-sum world. The wealth that we make, that you make, is made how? By creating value and by trading for those values. You know, I love my iPhone. I paid $1,000 for this. Why? Why did anybody pay $1,000 for a phone? I use it all the time. But how much? If I pay $1,000 for this, what does it mean in terms of how much value it is for me? It's more than $1,000. Now, it's a lot more than $1,000. Many multiples of thousands of dollars. I know you guys don't remember life without an iPhone. You were born with one at the hip. I know that. But I do remember. And life is so much better that this is worth tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to me. In terms of real utility, this is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not having to use, I mean, given Waymo, this sounds funny, but not having to use a map, physical map, while driving, how much is that worth? How many accidents has that prevented? Not being able to access every piece of music written and composed in all of human history at a marginal cost of zero. Being able to access all the knowledge, the information, everything else. I mean, I could go on and on. Being able to video, FaceTime or whatever with my kids and tell them a bedtime story by video from around the world, wherever I travel. How much is that worth? You want to put a dollar amount on that one? Yeah. I mean, we take it all for granted. But just a little bit a while ago, 15 years, 16, a little bit more, 17 years ago, it didn't exist. You're creating the technologies of the future, And when I buy this iPhone for $1,000, am I better off or worse off? I'm better off. Is Apple better off? Apple's better off. Who got exploited? Win-win. I'm better. They're better. You can ask me in the Q&A about all the kids exploited. That's fine. I've got answers to every one of those questions. I've heard them all before. You can ask me. But in that transaction, nobody got exploited. And I would argue across the entire supply chain, very few get exploited, and the way to solve the exploitation problem is not for you to stop buying iPhone. You'll only increase exploitation, not decrease it, by stopping to buy iPhone. So why are businessmen so looked down upon, often despised, considered robber barons, exploiters? Where does that idea, why is that idea? Well, here's the question. Why do you do what you do? Why do most people in business, entrepreneurs, tech, going out there and starting companies, founders, why do you do what you do? You're curious. You want to fulfill your curiosity. What else? Why are you doing what you're doing? Yeah, you want to express yourself. You want to be able to express yourself, right? What else? What's that? You want to self-actualize. You want to take whatever abilities you have and you want to express them to your fullest ability. And these are real opportunities for you to do that, right? You're exceptional, and you want to express the fact that you're exceptional out there. You want to manifest it. All right, that's good. What else? You're ambitious. What it? Make money. And everybody laughs, right? Notice that. Laughter is a way in which we kind of suppress a little embarrassment because we don't want to admit to ourselves that we're actually doing anything to make money. But certainly making money has to factor in, and it factor in significantly, maybe less than self-expression and wanting to make the most of your life and manifest yourself, and making money is important. It's part of the motivation. I would say there are two reasons why people do the kind of work that all of us do. And two reasons why you're willing to work as hard as you do. And a lot of you work really, really hard. Two reasons why you're willing to give up so much in order to do this work. Basically, two reasons. Love. To love what you do. That's the self-expression. That's the manifestation of all these things. It's I want to do something I'm passionate about. I love doing. I want to fulfill my abilities. If I'm exceptional, I want to do something spectacular. The second is you want to make money. Those are the two driving motivations. Both of those motivations are geared towards benefiting whom? Yourself. You're all selfish bastards. You're all motivated by your own self-interest. You're all motivated to do it because you want to do it, because you love it, you have fun, you enjoy it, you're self-actualizing. You can give it all the words that you want, but it's all about you. And you want to make money, which is, everybody knows it's pretty self-interest, right? You're all motivated by self-interest, and every businessman. You go out there into the world, whether they're in the steel industry or whether they're in the tech industry or whether they're farming. They hopefully love what they do. And I say hopefully. Not everybody loves what they do, but I think the people who are really successful and who really achieve something love what they do. And they want to make money. And those are pretty self-interested motivations. What did your mother teach you about self-interest? About being selfish? Yeah, I know what my mother taught me. Think of yourself last. Think of other first. She never meant it. Good Jewish mother, right? She didn't mean it. She wanted me to be successful, and to be successful, you have to think of yourself, right? But that is what we're taught to say. What we're taught to say, what we're taught is the good, what we're taught is morality, is not to think of yourself, to be what? Selfless. We're taught to be selfless. Our entire moral code in our culture Nobody practices this, granted. Nobody lives up to it. That's part of the gimmick. The entire code of the culture is to be selfless, to be altruistic. Now you can be not just altruistic, but you can be effectively altruistic. And I'm sure some of you here are adherents, if not have heard of effective altruism. But altruism is the idea that the purpose of life, fundamental idea of altruism, is the purpose of life, the moral purpose of life. And morality is something important. The moral purpose of life is other people. It's to help others, assist others. And while we can all make the case that what you do and what all those billionaires do is help other people. Right? I mean, can you be a billionaire without helping other people? In a free market, in a non-coercive market, can you be a billionaire without helping other people? Not really. I mean, everybody's buying your product because it makes them better off. Otherwise, they wouldn't buy your product. So every time you sell a product, somebody's life is better. And a hedge fund manager doesn't make the world a better place? It does. You know, it's a little bit more complicated. If you want, I can explain how hedge funds work and how they make a world a better place. You can ask me in the Q&A. But for now, trust me, it works the same principle. It's a trade. You could be a drug dealer. So there are a few professions where literally you can make money by hurting your customer. But that's very, very unusual. And a big part of why you can make a lot of money in drugs. What's the reason you can make a lot of money in the drug business? Because you're selling a commodity. So who can make a lot of money with selling a commodity? Nobody. Unless somebody makes the commodity illegal. And if you make it illegal, now there's a massive premium for all the risk you're taking in selling an illegal drug. If drugs were legal, if heroin, cocaine, I mean, I'm talking about drugs, right? If they were legal, would there be billionaires selling drugs? No. It would be just like aspirin in terms of the profit margin. Competition would drive the profit margins to zero or close to zero. Nobody would be a billionaire selling heroin. So what makes heroin, what makes these bad things profitable is the fact that they're illegal. At least that's the case with drugs. So you can be a billionaire. I mean, think about any one of our billionaires, and you can be a billionaire without having hundreds of millions of people buying your product, and by buying your product, their lives are better. Otherwise, they wouldn't buy. Why would I buy something that makes my life worse? I'm buying stuff that make my life better. So by the very fact that somebody's a billionaire, they've impacted hundreds of millions of people's lives. There's almost no other way to be a billionaire. Now, Elon Musk is a little different because he hasn't affected that many people's lives yet. And he's a billionaire out of the anticipation, because the market is assuming that he will affect hundreds of millions of people's lives in the future. Space travel, electric cars, whatever. So the argument that we benefit everybody, that successful people, that billionaires, that wealthy entrepreneurs benefit everybody, that doesn't convince anybody. Because everybody knows that the motivation is self-interest. Self-interest in our world, in our culture, self-interest is viewed as a vice, not a virtue. Self-interest is viewed as something evil and bad. And even when entrepreneurs start giving all their money away, why are they not liked, even after they've given a lot of their money away? Like, I don't know, Bill Gates is like one of the most hated people in the world today for all kinds of reasons. But he's like giving his money away, and he can't buy any love. Why is that? What's that? It just proves he's guilty. It's like but more than that, it's like Bill Gates still seems like he's having fun. Like, do you know Bill Gates has a trampoline room in his house? Like, the whole room is just one trampoline. Like, I don't care how much money he gives away. If he has a trampoline room, He's not a good guy. Good guys don't have trampoline rooms. Like Mother Teresa had no use for trampoline rooms. But that's our morality. If you're having fun, trampoline room actually sounds amazing. I wish I had a trampoline room. Sounds like so much fun. Particularly when my kids were home, that would be a blast, right? But you're having fun. You're being self-interested. You're pursuing your own fun, your own happiness. And that's out. Our culture doesn't believe in that. And it comes up with all kinds of excuses why, in spite of the fact that you're adding value, you don't deserve admiration. Maybe the best one was Obama. I think Obama's best speech, at least best speech in terms of communication and power, was a speech he gave, I think it was 2014 or 2012. It was called, basically, where he talked about, you didn't build it. I don't know if you've heard this speech, right? You didn't build that. Whatever it is you build, right? I know a lot of you are building stuff right now. Obama's telling you, you didn't do that. You're just an accident of your genes, right? You have a particular DNA. That's why you are what you are. And you grew up in a particular environment, and you didn't control that. You didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose your genes. And you had a great teacher. And somebody built the roads. And somebody did this and that and that other. You get no credit for it. So even if people are successful and they see the value they create, then the story is, well, you're not responsible for it. So you might work really hard. You might really invest. You might think hard about the product you're making and about the value you're creating in the world. You might really plan and work 16-hour days, 7 days a week, but it's not you. It's just that DNA that you have by accident has created what it is. You have no say in it. Now that's nuts. Your DNA, sure, plays a bit of a role. And I'm sure the kind of parents you had plays some bit of a role. Although I know people who have horrible parents who've done phenomenally well. A number of people who have great parents who've done phenomenally well, and the opposite. So I don't know exactly how this plays out. But there's one factor that nobody ever mentions, right? There's the nature-nurture debate, right? Is it DNA or is it your environment? What determines who you are? What's missing? You. Like the choices you make. Like the decisions you come to. You are not just a robot. I know some of you are building robots. You are not a robot. You are not determined. You are not just a product of something external to you. You are what you create. You are what you make of yourself. And I know it's not popular these days to believe in free will, but you have it whether you acknowledge it or not. You make choices. Good choices lead to good outcomes ultimately. You get to shape your life. You get to bring meaning to your life. So the idea that you didn't build that is ludicrous. You do build it, and therefore you deserve credit for it. But to really get that credit for it, we need to rethink our whole conception of what is moral. Morality is an important thing. Morality is kind of a guide to life. It's like tells you what's good and what's evil, what's right and what's wrong. And we've kind of lived on a certain framing of all of that for about 2,000 years that has been very clear that all of morality is guided towards this selflessness, towards other people. But that doesn't really answer the real crux of what morality is really for. We're a unique species. We're not born with a DNA that guides how we survive and how we live. We're not born with a knowledge of how to survive in the world. Like I take any one of you and I pluck you down into the Amazon. And if you just rely on your DNA and what's programmed in you, how long will it take for you to die? 1 day, a week, not very long. But yet, I'm sure that if I plucked this entire group under the Amazon, some of you will survive and survive quite well. What will you have to do in order to survive? Use your mind. You'll have to think. You'd have to create. You'd have to figure stuff out. You'd have to find solutions to problems that you face. We're not programmed because you take an animal, either their programming works in this environment or it doesn't work in this environment. If it doesn't work, they die. If it works, they thrive. Human beings will adapt, will adjust, because we have this amazing tool called our mind, our reasoning capacity, that can adjust to the environment that we see. You all know Yuval Noah Harari, famous philosopher out there. He's got this TED Talk where he says, you put a chimpanzee and a human being on a desert island. And he says, the chimpanzee will do great, and the human being will die. And with all due respect, Yuval, that's nuts. The chimpanzee will only thrive if the desert island happens to be accommodating to the programming that the chimpanzee has, to the environment that its DNA evolved in order to live by. If there's no food on the island that the chimpanzee can identify as food, he will die. The human being will adapt. He'll rediscover new food. He'll change his environment to fit his needs. The human being is the one who will thrive. The chimpanzee is the one who will die. Because we have the capacity to reason. Now, because of that, if we're going to have a morality is a guide to what is good and what is not. Based on what criteria? Well, what I would say, what we need is a guide to what allows us to survive in this world and what will kill us. Generally, what will kill us is evil and bad. What will allow us to thrive is good. And we need to be taught that, because the world is much more complex than just a desert island. We're not going to just figure it out on the floor. What kind of life do we want to live? So we need to recalibrate or rethink what morality is, to think in terms of how do we survive? How do we thrive? How do we flourish as human beings? What is the way in which we can live the best life that we can live? Not how do we sacrifice to other people? How do we take care of other people? That might be a piece of it. The question of how do we relate to others. But the fundamental is, how do we live? Because we don't know. It's not obvious. Philosophers have been thinking about this for thousands of years. How do we live? What's that? Yeah, but how? As individuals doing what? We need guide. We need a guide. We need a guide to tell us what is good and what is bad on the principle. And this is what morality is for. Those principles that lead to life, those principles we want are good. Those principles that lead to death are ones that we want to avoid. Those principles that encourage us or promote our success, our flourishing, our happiness are good. Those that are anti all that are evil. So morality should be a guide to living. It should be a guide to living a good life. It should be focused on our self-interest. Not just on how we treat other people, but how we treat ourselves. Morality exists on a desert island. On a desert island, you have to make choices about how you're going to live, if you're going to live. Even though there's nobody else there. So it's time to rethink and maybe abandon that old morality that only focuses on being selfless. I mean, the main question with the morality of selflessness is, why? Why should I be selfish? Why shouldn't I live for myself? I mean, all I've got is me. I don't know about you guys, but all I have is my life. And you only have one of it. You don't get a second chance. Every minute that passes, you will never get back. As you get older, you realize this more and more. You don't get reruns. You don't get an afterlife. This is it. Why not make the most of this? Why not make this the best that it can be? And how do you do that? Well, first, by using the tool that we've been given to be able to survive. You know, we're a pretty pathetic animal. Talked about this before. We're pretty pathetic. If you look around the room, you guys are pathetic. You're weak. You're slow. You have no claws, no fangs. I put you against a saber-toothed tiger. Who wins? One-on-one, the saber-toothed tiger beats you. And yet, here we are as a species sitting in a comfortable room with lights. And I don't know, this is what, a crypto space, talking about AI and all kinds. Last time I saw a saber-toothed tiger was in a museum somewhere. What made it possible for us to be here and him to be dead is your mind, is our ability to reason, our ability to think. So if we build a morality around human beings thriving, about human success, about human beings being successful in life, then it has to be a morality built around the idea of reasoning, about the idea of thinking, the idea of using our minds to create the values that are necessary for us to live. And the people who do that, the people who create the value, who use their mind, who produce the products and the values that make it possible for all of us to live, they should be our moral heroes. They should be the good guys in the world. They should be the people who we thank, not condemn. And the fact that they're having fun, and the fact that they're enjoying their money, and the fact that they're pursuing their love, and the fact that they're pursuing their passion, that's a plus, not a minus. Human happiness is good, not bad. Human fun is good, not a negative. The fact that Bill Gates has a trampoline room should cause us all to wish we had trampoline rooms, not to condemn him for the fact that he has one. The fact that people enjoy their work and love their work with passion should inspire us, not cause us to condemn them. The fact that people are living the best life that they can live and loving it is amazing. It's the way all human beings should live. So this is the morality of self-interest. I'm giving you a very short outline, right? This is the morality Ayn Rand developed in her novels, Atlas Shrugged, but in books like The Virtue of Selfishness, which I highly recommend everybody read. But it's a morality that basically, at the end of the day, presents the producers, the creators, the builders, the people who build stuff, as heroes. As heroes, not because they make, mankind better, because they help their fellow man. All that is true. They do make the world a better place. They do help their fellow man. But no, they're heroes because they've made the most of their own lives. They're heroes because they've taken their excellence, their potential, their abilities, at whatever level they have, and made the most of them. They've created values. They built stuff and made stuff. They've had fun. They took this one life that they had, and they made the most of it. So my attitude towards billionaires is, I love them. And I want to thank them. And I want to thank you guys. Not because you are billionaires. I don't think that we have any billionaires in the room. But because you might be billionaires one day. And that'll mean that you will have had a profound impact on my life. So thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Yaron. We're going to have a Q&A now, so if you want to have a question, raise your hand, and I'm going to pass around the microphone.
All in the back, the work for it.
Hi, thank you so much for a wonderful, interesting talk. I was wondering, it seems like believing that this theory is true would require believing that giving people what they want is always a good thing, because that's what people will pay for. So if that's presupposed, what if people want something like drugs, for example? That was one example. Another example might be social media. Like a lot of kids that I know personally are addicted to social media. So I'm wondering how you address that. Like, is giving people what they demand always moral?
So No, it's not. It's not always moral. But here's the point. Who is best positioned to decide what is best for me? And put aside children right now. We'll get to children in a second. Who is best positioned to decide what is good for me? Me. I might be wrong. And I might be suicidal, like most drug addicts, I think, are in the end suicidal. But that's my business. And as I said, I think today's environment that creates enormous profits for drug business is why drug business makes so much money. If it was legal, it wouldn't be making so much money. Nobody's in a better position to decide what's good. You know, I remember a long, long time ago, people used to buy something called pet rocks. You guys don't know. These are rocks that they behaved like pets too. And it was like, these people are nuts. This isn't good for them. But who am I to say it's not good for that person? For that person, they might be, I don't know what they get out of it. What do people get out of little silly dolls and little silly decorations that I don't understand? I'm not in a position to make those decisions for them. Only they can make those decisions. Social media or children who are addicted to social media. Certainly when it comes to children don't have the capacity to know what's good for them. And this is where being a parent gets hard. Your job as a parent is to try to project to your children what is good for them and limit their access to things that are bad for them. And the fact that many of us as parents default on that responsibility is more the parent's fault than anybody else's. So, sure, you can create scenarios in which you are selling stuff to people who are not using it appropriately, are not making or not benefiting ultimately from it. But that is ultimately their responsibility, not yours. But I would say, you know, when you go for a career, when you go and make something and build something, try to make something and build something you're going to be proud of. Right? We talked about love, that you love, right? And if you really think, oh, I'm building this thing, I'm selling it, but people are really worse off because of it, then it's not going to be as much fun and you're not going to enjoy it as much, and don't do it. Right? Like if you're I don't know, in the cigarette business and you discover cigarette causes cancer, I suggest you switch careers. It probably becomes a lot less fun once you realize that what you're doing is actually hurting people. So pursue, you know, your self-interest, but your self-interest is not just money. We talked about this before, right? Your self-interest is money, but it's also what? Love, passion, interest, challenge, excitement. And that is not consistent with hurting other people. Not because you're sacrificing to other people, because other people are value. I mean, you guys all look nice. I don't want to hurt you, even if I'm going to make a buck off of it. Money is not the primary. Money is the consequence, and money goes hand in hand with that, you know, pursuing your interest and your challenge, your path.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. I'm John. I am in SF, where we're in SF, and I can't help but ask this question. AI is improving greatly, and now we're getting to the stage where there's a lot of reasoning that the AI does. Quotations, obviously, but let's assume a happy case where we have good AI that does basically most of the economic activity, but aligned to humans. In that type of world, how do you see the moral philosophy posited by Ayn Rand? What kind of implications does it have?
I don't think it changes anything fundamentally. It just means now that, I think this is true of all technology, it means that we as human beings have more time and more energy that we can devote to really figuring out new things, the things we're really passionate about, because a lot of the basics are going to be taken up by machines, by robots, by AI, by whatever, however we want to categorize it. I mean, think about life just 250 years ago. Every single person in this room, almost, like 90% of the people in this room would be out in the field. Like most of you would be dead. Start with that, right? The population is a fraction of what it is today. But the rest of you would be farmers. Or you would be blacksmiths. And you would literally be working from sunrise to sunset. And then there'd be no electricity. You'd basically go to sleep. Life sucked. I think that's a technical term. It sucked. And since the birth of the Industrial Revolution, life has got dramatically, exponentially better. And it's going to get, because of AI, even more exponentially better, right? The exponential graph just goes straight up. And that means today we have time for lectures like this. 300 years ago, a tiny little group of people on planet Earth had time to sit around talking about ideas. We have time for vacations and restaurants. And, you know, restaurants, when was the first restaurant ever in the world? Like in the 18th century, and today there's like a gazillion of them, and we spend a lot of our time and resources on eating out. That was unheard of even 50 years ago, never mind 300 years ago. We go on vacations. Vacations is a modern concept. There were no vacations 150 years ago. Nobody went on vacations, again, except for the aristocrats. So our life will change in dramatic ways, which will allow us to be more self-expressive, to be more time to be able to really find what we're passionate about, less with the drudgery of planting seeds, less with the plow, and more with the brain. You know, physical work will disappear. Robots will do it all. And most of the work that gets done in the world will be mental work, and it'll be, you know, more fun and more enjoyable. So I see, as long as the interests are aligned and AI doesn't, you know, somebody doesn't use AI to kill us all, you know, that if the interests are really aligned, then technology will enhance our lives, and it'll just free up more time for us to explore more fascinating, interesting new things.
Hello. Thank you for the talk. So you said that billionaires, we should love them because they have something and they use it to like create amazing things. But what about billionaires who promote or who do crony capitalism, like the Chaebol groups in Korea or the Indian oligarchs and stuff like that? Should we still love them because they leverage the position they are in and now they are extrapolating on things, although they are still providing value, but you know, in a very hazy way?
Yes, I did say billionaires in a free market or a semi-free market. I certainly don't love oligarchs. I don't know about the Indian oligarchs, don't know enough about them, but I know a lot about the Russian oligarchs, and believe me, I don't like them at all. Or the Ukrainian oligarchs or the Bulgarian oligarchs. There are a lot of oligarchs in Eastern Europe who benefited enormously, basically from stealing property after the fall of communism and aggregating it, and the state then protected them. And so it wasn't wealth creation, it was wealth accumulation, which is very similar to the way aristocrats were made in the past, more stealing than building and creating. So I would separate those two out. I also think you know, when we talk about cronyism, we have to remember, particularly in the United States, we have to remember the source of cronyism. The source of cronyism is not businessmen groveling before the government or bribing the government to try to get favor. The source of cronyism is the government coming to the businessman with a gun and saying, you better behave yourself. And then the businessmen, you know, defending themselves. And often, sadly, that defense morphs into, yeah, we want to manipulate the system in our favor. But it always begins with the government coming to them with force. You saw this with Zuckerberg, you know, being dragged in front of Congress. Congress, these people who've never run a business, never employed anybody, don't know anything about economics or how businesses run or how businesses manage, yelling and educating Zuckerberg about how to run his business, about what to do and what he cannot do. And then him saying, okay, if you're going to regulate me, then here's my proposal for regulations. And, you know, slowly you see a merger, and you see him being influenced by them. But he would have never gone to Washington unless they invited him. I don't think it's an invitation. Forced him to come. The best example of this is a famous story about Microsoft. Microsoft in the early 1990s was the largest corporation in the world by market cap. It spent on lobbying exactly $0. They had no lawyers, no presence in DC, nothing. And they were invited to Washington, and they sit in front of a congressional hearing, Senate hearing, And Orrin Hatch, the senator from Utah, gets up and he starts yelling at them. He says, you guys need to be here in Washington. You need to start lobbying. You need to build a headquarters here. You need to have offices here. You need a presence in Washington, D.C. Who do you think you are? We're important. Come bribe me. He didn't say it that way, but that was the implication, right? And Microsoft basically goes, Bill Gates wasn't there, but whoever was there says, look, you leave us alone, we'll leave you alone, and they walk up. 6 months later, knock on the door. We're from the Justice Department. We're here to, we believe you're a monopoly. You're abusing your power, right? Antitrust law. Well, anybody remember what they went after them for? What was the monopoly thing that Microsoft did? They gave away a browser for free, Internet Explorer. I'm sure all of you use Internet Explorer today because it's a monopoly, right? But that's what they went after them. The whole 10 years of Microsoft under the Justice Department was all about the fact that they bundled Internet Explorer with the operating system for free. So customers didn't hurt the customer. But what did Microsoft learn from that? We better have a presence in Washington. We better lobby for our interests. I don't know if you know the building Microsoft built in Washington, D.C., about equal distance from the White House and Congress. It's a beautiful glass building, beautiful offices there. Microsoft today spends 9 figures on lobbying every year. It's one of the most aggressive lobbies. Google, by the way, from its founding, which was after the Microsoft case, said, we are going to have a presence in Washington. We are going to lobby because otherwise they will screw us from the beginning. But that wasn't, again, the initiative comes from those who want to impose their will on you. It's rare that a self-respecting businessman goes, yeah, I want to, self-actualize by going to Washington and getting favors and subsidies. It's not typically how it works.
So it seems like objectivism has a lot of criticisms of altruism, but also like using, Ayn's logic, it seems like there's a lot of ways where you can frame that sort of altruism to ultimately be self-serving. Like I can do something for someone and get something explicitly out of it, or I can, do something for the world and there's a positive externality that I want out of it that benefits me. So I guess the question is, how do you differentiate between veiled altruism and true altruism? And also, how do you start conversations where you're actually criticizing not selfishness, but poorly executed selfishness, which I think is the case with most of these billionaire conversations?
You think most of billionaire conversations are poorly executed selfishness?
Yes.
In what way?
I think if they executed it well, there would be a lot less conversations about them.
Oh, I doubt that. But okay, I mean, let's first ask the question. So let's be clear about what altruism means, because I think this is important. The way Ayn Rand uses it, but really the way philosophy uses it, versus the way I think it's used in the culture. So altruism is a term coined by a French philosopher, Auguste Comte, in the 19th century. And his idea of what altruism means is that you sacrifice yourself, your self-interest, for somebody else. That you are worse off by helping somebody else. Indeed, he said, if you are better off, if you enjoy helping other people, you can legitimately enjoy helping other people, that doesn't count as altruism. And indeed, I think that's the way implicitly the culture views it. Like, who helped more people? Who helped more people in the world? Bill Gates or Mother Teresa? Not the front row, everybody else. Who helped more people, Bill Gates or Mother Teresa? I mean, Bill Gates, it's not even close. Bill Gates sold billions of products that made billions of people's lives better off. And even the poorest tribe in Africa that gets aid shipped to it from from Europe, from the US, the people who ship the aid are using a Microsoft product to figure out the logistics of getting it there, right? And if it's not a Microsoft product, it's running on a Microsoft machine. It's somehow linked to Microsoft. So the people who are getting the aid, the people who've never seen a computer, are benefiting from the fact that the aid agencies have computers. So the aid gets there faster, cheaper, better. Everybody in the supply chain benefits from Bill Gates. But why is Bill Gates not considered a moral hero? Because he made money at it. Well, trampoline helps, doesn't help his case. But the fact is he made money off of it. So the fact that he benefited from helping other people rules it out as altruistic. Whereas Mother Teresa helped very few people, but she suffered doing it. She had a horrible, miserable life helping other people. So she's a saint. She's great. The builders, the creators, the people who actually benefit mankind, but at the same time make money at it, they don't count morally. And Mother Teresa does. So one indication, so the way in which altruism is used by philosophers is that it has to be a real net loss. If it's a net gain, then it's not clearly altruistic. Now for Rand, for something to be self-interested, it has to be rational. It has to be based on reason. You have to have a reason. So just saying, I did it because it felt good, is not, in Ayn Rand's view, being self-interested. Feeling good is not good enough. You have to be able to explain why it's good for you. That is, it makes your life better. It's positive in terms of its survival value or its value to your flourishing. So to take the example from before, taking drugs might feel good. Right? Yeah, I get high. But is that moral? Is that selfish? Ayn Rand would say taking drugs is not selfish. Why? Because it's self-destructive. Because ultimately, if you understand the effect drugs have on you over time, it will destroy you. So even though it makes you feel good, it's selfless. It's self-denying because it's leading towards destruction and not towards health and success and flourishing. So the standard is an objectively, rationally, what is good for you qua human being, as a human being? What leads to your flourishing and what leads to your destruction? And, sometimes we don't know. And it's very difficult to judge other people in that sense because you don't know other people's motivation and you don't know what kind of thinking they've gone through in the choices that they made. But you can certainly tell about yourself, and that's what's important. What you should choose is a rational life that is guided towards your own flourishing, your own success at living. Does that answer the question? I will move a little forward at some point.
I'm curious to hear how negative externalities play into this worldview. If I drive my, say, gas guzzling car that gets 2 miles to the gallon, it gets me to where I'm going, so it brings positive value to my life. It creates a lot of value in the economy by moving equipment around. There's a lot of waste, so it's perfect. GDP goes up, fantastic, and yet there are these negative externalities that aren't accounted for in our typical way of thinking about quote unquote value in an economic free market system. How does that play into this worldview?
So I would say that a lot of the negative externalities are negative externalities. They're there. And unless you can find a way to internalize the externality, that is, to put a cost on it that somebody bears, then they're just going to be there. Just like most of the positive externality, nobody ever pays for. Nobody pays for all the positive externalities we have. And our life, by the way, is dominated, not by negative externalities. Negative externalities play a tiny little role in our life. Most of our life is dominated by the positive externalities. The positive externalities of all the past knowledge that we benefit from, the positive externalities of the massive consumer surplus that we have. As I said, the iPhone cost $1,000, but it's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to me. That's a positive externality, a massive one. Nobody pays Apple for all the benefit I get from the iPhone. So generally, I think we exaggerate the negative externalities. I think we make way too much of a deal from them. If the negative externality is harsh, it's really there, and it's really significant, then I think what you have is people getting together and trying to educate people about the negative externalities and changing people's behavior. So climate change climate change is a negative externality, and we're all aware of it. And a lot of people are working all kinds of technologies to try to reduce climate change or to try to reduce human effect on climate change, right? But the reality is that most of the solutions offered for climate change have much, much, much greater negative externality than climate change itself. So if we tomorrow decided to stop using fossil fuel, the negative externality of that would be exponentially greater than the negative externalities of continuing to use fossil fuel, as we continue to develop technologies that are slowly changing. So I'm all for, let's take that into account in our lives. Let's think about how we behave as individuals, because we care about our own lives, not just today, but in 10 years and 20 years. We care about our children's lives in 10, 20, 30 years. So let's internalize that and change our behavior. I can't coerce other people to do the same. I can try to educate them. And let's try to create technologies and use our ingenuity to solve these kind of problems. But let's also not use coercive means that tend to have dramatically greater negative externalities, we're going to use those terms, on humanity. This does the problem we're trying to solve.
Hi, so my question is, how do we not get shot? And it's funny, but I think it's very real. The reason I say that is because I think what's going to happen to the economy is that's going to get automated, and there will be a great labor shift. And I've seen it myself. When you automate someone's jobs, there's a sense of desperation in them. And can I make my next paycheck? Can I, pay tuition, stuff like that, right? So I think it's nice that you love billionaires, but when that mob gets in front of your house and people are desperate, they won't.
Yeah, the funny thing is that I've heard that story. I'm old, so I've heard it for decades now. And if you read a little bit of history, you know that the fear of the mob has dominated people's thinking, even in the in the 19th century. What are we going to do when people lose those jobs at the hand sewing or hand weaving or whatever? And they're going to lose those jobs, and they lose those jobs. And yeah, it's tough on people when they have to restructure. But the reality of technology is, whether and this has been true for the last 250 years, the reality of the technology is that it makes human life better for everybody, pretty much. Even if it means in the short run, people are worse off, in the long run, they're better off. And part of our job is to educate them about that, the fact that they're better off long term. But they realize it pretty quickly. They've never been a revolution because of technology, anti-technology revolution. There have been attempts by Luddites to burn down factories and stuff like that, but very few businessmen have been shot because of these issues. Because life actually gets better. Now, and we also live in a world in which we've created, for better or worse, mostly for worse, I think, we've created a massive welfare state that shields people from the consequences of what's happening. I think that builds resentment. I think it doesn't allow for the adjustment that everybody needs to go through in order to benefit from the changes of technology. But it shields them, it protects them, it gives them time, supposedly, or it reinforces their desire for stagnation, as the case, I think, is. So I wouldn't worry too much about you guys being shot, unless we do a really poor job in educating people, unless people are so shielded from the upside of what's happening, which I think the welfare state does. It shields them from the upside so that they get so frustrated and then ultimately they do come for you. But yeah, it's a concern. It's why talking up the benefits that you provide is and the value that you create is worth doing. Yeah, you got to follow up. Don't we have to rely, I'm just repeating for the taping, don't we have to rely on the government to shift resources because of that? No. I mean, the government is the slowest entity to shift resources ever. the shifting of resources happens really, really fast, really efficiently, really effectively by the private market. I mean, Silicon Valley was basically created in 1980. Where did the capital for Silicon Valley come from? Where did it come from? Literally, where did it come from? Geographically, where did the capital that created Silicon Valley come from? It created from the restructuring of dying businesses in the Midwest. It came from the fact that we now had steel mills that were not economic anymore, that were being restructured, shut down, sold off. That capital had to be reinvested. And it was reinvested here to create much better, much more forward-looking, much more productive, much more life-enhancing business. And where did the kids of the steel workers who lost their jobs go? They go back into steel work? No, because there was no steel job. They came here. The population of the Bay Area has grown dramatically over the last 50 years, right? Where did those people come from? They came from places that the market was restructuring. The market was was destroying industries because those industries were dead, and shifting resources, both human and capital, to industries that were being born and growing and alive, which mostly was here and some other places around the country. And people who were willing to recognize that and get in their car and move and restructure their lives because the world around them was changing benefited enormously from that. And people who didn't, who sat on their butts waiting for steel jobs to come back because President X promised to bring them back, they're frustrated, they're angry, they're mad because the steel jobs are never coming back. They can't come back. Most of them were automated away anyway. Yet they've been promised all these promises, and the welfare state has kept them wherever they are, and they haven't benefited from all the upside that Silicon Valley's created. So the private market, if you leave it to the private market, not the politicians' promises, but the private markets reallocate capital unbelievably fast. Unbelievably fast. We went from a pathetic economy in the 1970s. It was crippled by conglomerates, crippled by inefficiency and lack of productivity, to the most efficient economy in the world by the 1990s, because private markets restructured American business. And for that, a lot of people went to jail, literally, from Wall Street. A lot of people were accused of being robber barons or the equivalent of. And we blame the people who actually do the good, and we wait for government to save us.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the very passionate talk and very stimulating. Before actually asking the question, I wanted to ask you about your intent. What's your selfish intent actually coming here? And like, I doubt it's telling us to love billionaires, right? Like, there's zero utility in that. What brings you here?
I am a teacher. So somebody said self-actualization. My self-actualization is to communicate. It's to teach. I love conveying ideas and seeing your responses. Some of you hate me. Some of you love me. That's okay. I've done this many times. I know exactly what it's like. I love getting the response from you and hopefully changing a few minds. And it's not about even changing minds. I love getting you to think. I love the energy that other people starting to think, discovering new ideas, being exposed to an idea for the first time generate. Right? I get a kick out of that. That's what I enjoy doing. Now, I hope that over time, what that does is make the world a better place. That is, if I can inspire you guys to be a little bit more productive, if I can inspire you guys to be a little bit more proud of your work that you do, view yourself a little bit more positive, then if your attitude towards yourself changes, then I think the world's attitude towards you ultimately will change. If the world's attitude towards you changes, you will become even more productive than you are. I will benefit enormously from future iPhones and future Waymos and future AI and future all this. If you don't believe in yourself, if you feel guilty about your own success, if you demean your own challenges, the world would view you that way as well. And I will benefit a lot less because you will be a lot less productive, and governments and the rest of the world will not let you be as productive as you can. So my goal is a better world for me, my kids, the people I love. And, you know, I like human beings. So I like the fact that you guys will live in a better world as well.
Thank you. So this puts a really nice emphasis on the individual and the impact on the collective, right? And the actual question is, you mentioned that the government is a very slow and inefficient thing to move resources, you move surplus, all of these things. Except in some parts of the world, we create these hyperstructures that are dictatorships, authoritarian type of regimes that are actually phenomenal at being efficient, unfortunately. You know, you see the war in Ukraine. I'm from Ukraine. We see Russia doing phenomenal job at managing the economy and surviving sanctions and all of these things. So what's your take on that?
God. I think it's exact opposite. Authoritarian regimes are terrible at managing resources, are terrible at getting anything done. Russia is a basket case right now. You think the Russian economy is doing well? That's because you don't live there. For anybody who's actually living there, the economy is a disaster. Standard of living have plummeted. Inflation is through the roof. Interest rates are 24%. You try start a business when you have to pay interest at 24%, right? There's no entrepreneurship. There's no innovation. There's nothing new being created. All the resources are going into building the military. The military sucks. Now, somebody who, you haven't heard my background, but somebody who has fought against T-72s, T-72s are like shit. Like, Western equipment is several generations better than Russian military equipment. So there's nothing about authoritarianism that produces things efficiently and well. One of the reasons I think China's overrated is because it's authoritarian. 10 years ago, when it actually had liberated its economy and much of its tech sector was fairly free, was fairly unregulated, they could do pretty much whatever they want, they were left alone, they were going gangbusters and they were innovating and they were producing amazing stuff. Over the last 10 years, Xi has slowly shut down whatever freedom existed. You know how many significant startups China had last year? So this graph at The Economist, 0 tech startup of any significance, right? And you think you can innovate without startups? You think you can innovate without the competitive juices that startups produce, and without the freedom of people to do new things and create new stuff without a bureaucrat sitting over your shoulder watching what you do? Authoritarian regimes are a disaster at allocating resources. And yeah, sure. And by the way, you know, one of the worst measures we have in economics, is GDP. GDP is what we all use to measure economic success: GDP per capita, GDP growth, GDP this, GDP that. You know what GDP was in the United States? GDP growth in the United States was 1942, the first year in which the United States was in World War II. What was GDP growth in the United States? Half the male population was sent overseas to fight in a war. All the productive resources were put into building weapons, right? What is GDP growth? 12%. 12%. What was the standard of living? Did it go up or down? It collapsed, right? You were in the trenches, you were a guy, and if you were home, all the money was going to build weapons. You had nothing. Yeah, GDP went up. GDP in Russia is going up. Standard of living is collapsed. Well, because, yeah, people, a lot of people in the world are fine with, fine with dying slowly. I mean, a huge percentage of the human population seems to be fine with dying slowly. That doesn't make it good. That doesn't make it something we should aspire to. That should make those of us who love life want to avoid and want to resist and want to stop. And, you know, the Russians who are not fine with it, what have they done? They left. Hundreds of thousands of them left. And they're not, and it's going to take a lot to get them back because they don't want that kind of love. I'm skeptical. AI research might be phenomenal in China. But to take that research and turn it into products requires innovative thinking, and it requires entrepreneurial attitude. And that, right now, China's killed. It exists in China. The ability is there. We know that. We know Chinese engineers. We know Chinese entrepreneurs. We know the ability is there. But the government has shut off that spigot. So they are controlling everything. If you think a centrally planned AI is going to be better than an AI produced through the market forces in the United States, then I think you think you live in a different planet. I mean, no centrally planned anything is going to do better than something that is coming from the bottom up through the kind of competitive juices that the kind of environment for AI in the United States has. So I don't worry about the Chinese beating us at that. They can beat us at producing things where the science is limited, where the entrepreneurship has already been done, like batteries and cars, and they can pour a lot of capital, where most of it is capital, where it's capital intensive. Where it's idea intensive, you have to have freedom. And without freedom, you're not going to innovate. You're not going to really be able to. Freedom is an enormous value.
Yeah, it's a common, like, I think in certain places, in certain areas, several people really believe that Bitcoin is a practical implementation of Ayn Rand's philosophies, right? And I think your mission is something that I really feel is really great, because several people that worked on such technologies were actually sent to jail, and many of them are still in jail till today. And for founders who are like really working in this industry or in other industries where, that could feel threatened to the government or government cohesion, right? I think it's a very, very interesting space to work at in terms of your mindset. How do you, work feeling that maybe in the next 5 years or 10 years, you're going to make so much impact, but you could actually go to jail, right? I think it's a very, very funny, dynamic. But also, I would love to know, what you think the future is going to look like when we know that we're going to have automation with AI, we're going to have, Bitcoin, we're going to have private settlements or private payments. And this actually is going to be around the whole world. It's going to be more of like, the world is going to be more of a global community against, the current like economic world really is, in a way, technically excludes the third world, right? And I think like when we include the third world and we see all these technologies happen all together, what is the world going to look like and how should we prepare?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up two interesting points. One is there certainly is a fear factor involved in certain technologies that threaten the powers to be. And crypto, whatever you think about crypto, crypto threatens the powers to be. And we've already seen that with the debanking of crypto that happened 2 years ago and is ongoing. Whole banks were shut down basically because they were too involved with crypto. I could talk a lot about that because I've done a lot of research on banks, and it was Elizabeth Warren's campaign, and she got it done. She basically debanked crypto for a while, and she destroyed banks. She destroyed their life. So it's tricky. If you're in an industry like that where you're threatening a government operation, then you have to watch it. And you have to be prepared for the downsides. The downsides clearly are there and are real. What does the world look like in 5 years, 10 years? I don't know. And a lot of it depends on, unfortunately, a lot of it depends on politics. A lot of it will depend on what's allowed to happen and what is not allowed to happen. I think that the potential for the involvement of the third world, of countries that don't have great, let's say, institutions of rule of law, but who can participate in economic world because of things like crypto, is huge. I mean, you're bringing on board another few billion people into active economic engagement, and I think that is a really, really positive thing. And if they can develop institutions, proper institutions, property rights and the rule of law, then you've got you're taking 8 billion people on planet Earth, and they all have the potential for productivity. Growth under those circumstances is it's hard to imagine how positive it can be. So I'm optimistic as long as the bastards in Washington stay out of both political parties.
Thank you. You admit, you've spent many years thinking on these ideas. I'm curious for, is there a counter argument to the ideas you've proposed today that you've heard through the years that you find to be the most compelling, that you still grapple with?
Not one that I still grapple with. I really do think, I think that once you get, and here I think the issue is, the two issues that we've talked about, if you will. One is morality and one is, if you will, economics. Once you get, you only have one life and a life is worth living, then I don't see how you get to the idea that you should live a selfless life and live for others. And I don't think anybody really takes that too seriously, because the fact is, everybody kind of, look at the self-help sections in bookstores. Everybody wants somehow to make a better life, even though morality tells them they shouldn't. And I'm saying, embrace the fact that you want to have a better life. Embrace it morally. Figure out what the moral rules are, what the moral principles are that you should live by, and run with it. Really engage with life. And I think once you get that, I don't see, I've never heard an argument when I ask people, why should I sacrifice? Sacrifice means lose for somebody else. I've never received a coherent answer other than, that's what we've always done. That's what God says. That's what society says, all of which I consider both, right? All just emotionalistic nothing. I've never heard a reasoned argument about why your lives are more valuable to me than my life. My life to me is more valuable than any of your lives to me. And the same should be for you. Right? So on the moral point, I don't see. On the issue of capitalism, again, every place it's tried, to the extent it's tried, it's incredibly successful. Markets work everywhere they're allowed to work. The strongest argument you can make is an externalities argument. And I think if you actually play out the externalities, you can see that the argument ultimately falls apart. And even under the worst case scenario of externalities, capitalism is the best solution if you take it in a holistic way, if you take all the outcomes of what you would do to remedy the externality and how that violates capitalism, violates property rights, and all the implications of that, you would see that capitalism still produces the optimal outcome. And if your life matters to you, if you become an egoist, right? If you buy into the idea of self-interest, then look, capitalism is the only system appropriate for people who believe in their own life, because it's the only system that says nobody can coerce you. Capitalism means freedom. It means freedom from coercion. You can do what you want to do. You can pursue your values based on your ideas, your conception of what is true. As long as you're not hurting other people, go for it. And if you hurt other people, then there are consequences. Either the consequences are civil, legal, or the consequences are criminal, depending on how you're hurting them. So don't hurt other people. And, use your judgment to live the best life that you can live. And that doesn't mean we all will, and it doesn't mean we'll all be successful. Failure is part of life. As entrepreneurs, I hope you all know that already. If you don't, you'll find out soon enough, right? Failure is part of life, but learn from it and grow and become better. So no, I haven't heard any really good arguments against either one of those. So I'm not grappling anymore. To me, the grappling comes to, how do I best communicate this? Because I think I'm still challenged. How do I best communicate that these ideas really do, they're right and they work. They're moral and they work. The moral is the practice.
Thanks so much for coming in. I think my question is trying to get at what is morally good, because it sounds like what's morally good is what's self-interested to me, but also on top of that, there seems to be some type of rational argument that I can make that this is good for the world. Is that right?
I think it's consistent with it being good for the world.
Yeah. Okay. So imagine a case where someone really loves, and I'm not saying this as a joke, someone really loves to kill.
Yep.
And they also love to kill, but specifically people who they deem as bad for the world.
Yep.
So they want to go out and they kill these people who they deem as bad, that they can have this rational argument that this person is bad for the world. Why Well, why does it seem like that is in some ways immoral?
Well, it is immoral, not seem some way.
Okay, okay.
It's incredibly immoral.
Then why
you don't get, if you value life, you don't get to decide the lives of other people. You don't get to decide who is good and who is bad, who lives and who isn't. If somebody is violating somebody else's rights and deserves to be punished, that's what you have, a system of law and a system of judging, and that's why you have to bring in evidence and you have to make a whole case. It should never be simple to say, oh no, he's a bad guy, we shoot him. This is human life, and you have to go through a whole process in a legal system in order to establish that, in order to prove it. But also, you have to ask yourself, what? And this goes back to the point I made earlier, that just because you like to do something doesn't make it good. You have to really ask the question, why does this guy like killing people? There's something really, really perverse, really, really horrific about liking the destruction of life, liking the destruction of something. That to me is even worse than taking drugs, right? You know, you know, the pleasure of seeing stuff, human life, being eviscerated. So I think there's a real psychological problem there. There's a real philosophical problem. Again, what you like has to be rational, has to be pro-life. Now, how do we determine that? Human beings have a particular nature. We're a particular type of animal. And therefore, they're particular, just like if we truly understood our biology, we should be able to say this food is good for you and this food is bad for you. If we understand our psychology, if we understand what it means to be human, how, you know, as a cognitive, as a conscious being, then we should be able to say these behaviors, these values are good for you, these values are bad for you. Destroying stuff is bad for you. Killing people is bad for you, unless it's in self-defense. It's bad for you. So if you like killing people, you've got to see a therapist. And soon. It's not healthy. It's not right. Something is screwed up. So, you know, you're on the side of death. You're not on the side of life.
It seems like you're presupposing that all of these things are inherently good or inherently bad. But what, apart from your...
I'm presupposing some things are inherently good, some things are inherently bad. I'm saying the things that are pro-life, pro-human life, are the good. Things that are anti-life, that are destructive to life, are bad.
Okay, so you also
and the things that are pro-life, I can tell you, I think the three, if you will, cardinal values. These are values that all human beings should pursue. I think there are three that are universal, right? Every person on the planet. I think reason, it's our means of survival. It's how we survive as human beings. If you don't take your mind seriously, you will not have a successful life. You will not be a good human being. Reason is, I'd say, everything. If you had to boil down the morality to one word, it would be think, right? Reason. Purpose, you have to have a reason to do things. You have to have a purpose in what you do. I think for most of us, for most of you in this room, your purpose is your career, your startup, the values you're creating, the passion, where you're oriented towards your passion. But everything in life has to have a purpose. You have to have a reason for doing what you do. Otherwise, you have no motivation and you're not building anything. And the third one is self-esteem. You have to have the sense that you belong on this earth and you are competent to deal with this earth. Self-esteem is not a pat on the back by somebody else. Self-esteem is not a ribbon that you get. Self-esteem is the knowledge that you can create value, that you can create values, that you know, that you're not an alien on this planet, that you can actually cope and survive on this planet and be successful. If you can achieve those three values in your life, I think every human being on the planet who achieves those three values will have a successful life. Now, it's hard. And there's you know, and you have to do a lot of thinking about how do you achieve those values and what kind of virtues are actions that you need to take in order to achieve those values. And this is where the science of ethics come in. This is the science of morality. Morality should be teaching us what are the universal values and virtues that all of us should be practicing in order to achieve happiness, in order to achieve success at living, at being alive. And I think they're all universal principles, and that's, again, the job of the philosopher, the job of the moral science. And we might disagree, but if we can agree that the purpose should be human flourishing, the purpose should be individual success at life, then the disagreements about which particular values or what particular virtues are going to be relatively small. The goal is much more important to me, and that's what I was talking about today. You know, your life is what's of value. Your life is the goal of morality. Your success at life is the goal of morality.
Okay, this is the last question.
I'll switch it to a more positive note. So every country, every country has its own heritage, and it seems to me that the political and economical and philosophical themes are gravitating towards their heritage. United States was founded with much less heritage, and hence it's like software version 2.0. What do you think the constitution of Mars is going to look like, given that it's not going to have much heritage at all?
So let me say that I think generally heritage sucks. I do not like tradition. I don't like conserving anything. I'm for building, changing, growing, you know, and finding the best and choosing the best. I'm an immigrant. I love immigrants because they've chosen to improve their life by moving. They've dumped their heritage and picked something better. And that, I think, is phenomenal and amazing. You know, we should embrace, because I think America is, whether the current administration likes it or not, this is a land of immigrants. This is a land built on the idea that heritage doesn't matter. Aristocrats don't matter. What your family name doesn't matter. What matters is what you make and what you do once you get here, what you do with your life once you get here. And my hope is that a Mars Constitution or some whatever Constitution is going to be, the American Constitution improved by 250 years of knowledge about what can go wrong. And we know a lot can go wrong. The American Constitution is a shadow of what it was originally. Much of it is being violated, and you know, remnants of it still survive. Well, let's figure out why it was violated. Let's figure out what the founders got wrong, and I say wrong with hesitancy because they did the best damn job they could given the state of knowledge 250 years ago. We know so much more today than they did 250 years ago, that we should be able to write a better constitution on the same principle. To me, the most important political document in all of human history is the Declaration of Independence, not the Constitution. And if we can take the Declaration of Independence and write a constitution that is even more loyal to it than the American Constitution is, and I think you can, that would be my ideal for what a constitution would look like on Mars. Now, whether we will get that, I am highly, highly, highly skeptical. Certainly Elon Musk doesn't agree with me. I mean, his vision for a Mars colony is some kind of participatory democracy, which I think is an absolutely unmitigated disaster. But you know, and so, you know, I can hope, but Elon Musk actually does. So I fear that his vision is going to be the one that wins up. What's that? I have a, you know, not that I know him, but you know, I have a love-hate relationship with him. I mean, there are moments where he just is an inspiration. It's like he's stunningly brilliant, and he just says stuff that nobody else will say. I mean, there was this, I think it was during COVID. Somebody asked him, "What are the regulators in all these countries going to do when Starlink is up, and what are they going to do about the internet? You know, about controlling the internet?" And he says they'll shake their fist at the sky. I thought that was like one of the most brilliant things you could say if you understand what that, you know, these thugs trying to, you know, they can't control it. Now, of course, they can, as we saw in Brazil. You know, Starlink caved completely on Brazil, and so did Twitter ultimately. You know, he'll come out and say great things about free speech vis-a-vis Brazil, right? And you say, oh, finally, somebody's standing up for politicians. And then a month later, he caves completely, and Twitter gives everything Brazil wanted, they give them. So, you know, and he loves Donald Trump. You know, how you know, I don't get it, right? So, you know, he says good things about immigrants, and then he backs off and says, oh, we only want the 0.1%, as if anybody knows how to identify the 0.1%, or you know, the founder of NVIDIA came as a kid. How would you even identify him as a kid as a 0.1%? and you could go on and on and on about the contradictions within him. I love him, you know, sometimes, and I hate him other times. And that's cool. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you, Yaron.